all goes as planned, this video is posting on May the 4th. So naturally, we are doing a Star Trek films tier list maker. Counter-programming. Okay, so I did not choose the order the films are in down here, as per usual. But in case this is your first one of these tier ranking videos of mine, I don't make these. I just find them, and I adjust them when I feel I should, and then yada yada. So it's kind of hot today, and I had to turn off the fan in order to record in here, because the noise the computer makes is going to be loud enough as is. I wish I had a setup where I didn't have to have the PC on the same desk as the microphone, but that's just not an option right now. Okay, so we got, the S tier for superb, and then you have A, B, C, D, and F, like the American school grading system, if you're familiar with that. If you're not, Google it. And let's just go ahead and... Okay, I'm going to go ahead and admit, my list is probably going to be pretty basic. I don't think anything on here is going to be too surprising. If you've seen a bunch of, Star Trek YouTubers' lists about the movies, I imagine that, all of theirs will be more surprising than mine. I think mine is going to be, mostly, yeah, that's where I'd put it too, from my viewers. Oh, that got really rambly. I don't even know if that makes sense. TLDR, there's really only one of these here where I think my placement of it will be even remotely controversial, but I can justify it. So let me just go ahead and start with that one, and then I'll do the rest of them in the order they're down here. Star Trek the Motion Picture is going into B tier, but with an asterisk. This only applies to the director's cut that was released on DVD in the early 2000s. I was honestly impressed. When my dad bought this, I did not go in with high expectations. I figured it's it's probably still going to be just as bland and stuff as I remembered it. And in some ways it was. There are some things that just can't be fixed, even with little CGI tweaking and editing, but it is a better movie. I think it's worth watching at least. I think if you've never seen any of the Star Trek films and you want to watch all of them, only watch the director's cut of the motion picture. It's not like with Wrath of Khan, where with Wrath of Khan you can watch the theatrical version or the director's cut, and they are both really, really good. There's not a lot of movies that you can say that about. Generally, when you have a theatrical cut versus a director's cut, one is better than the other. But with Wrath of Khan, they're just both amazing. With motion picture, though, there is definitely a clear choice there, and that is the director's cut. Scenes that ran on too long in the theatrical are trimmed down. Redundant bits of dialogue are removed. And, the CGI cleanup of the special effects sequences that they kept in look really nice. And then, okay, here's the part I think that's going to actually annoy some people. I never really had a problem with the reveal of the refit Enterprise in the movie. It is, at least to me, pure scenery porn. It is tough to pull off scenery porn. I mean, when you ask a lot of people, what authors can do scenery porn very well, if they can do a whole chapter just describing what a city looks like, and it's compelling, as opposed to being, feeling like filler to try and pad the word count. A name that gets dropped a lot there is China Mieville. I unfortunately can't say I've read some of his work, but people whose opinion I trust say that he is really good at the scenery porn stuff. And the reveal of the refit Enterprise in the motion picture with the score, that's scenery porn for me. Granted, it probably could have been shorter, and in Star Trek 2 it was shorter, because that was basically just some reused footage to try and save money, but I like it, as someone who loves that ship, who just never gets tired of seeing the old NCC 1701. Yeah, motion picture, B tier, but with an asterisk. Alright, now going back to the order that the list maker put them in. I don't know. Again, I have no idea why. It's not alphabetical. It's not in release date order. It's not anything. I don't know how he sorted it. Could you have sorted it by runtime? I don't think so, because I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Into Darkness is not shorter than Nemesis. But well, anyway. Okay, search for Spock. This one's also going to go into the B tier. I think it gets a bit of a bad rap. And admittedly, while it wasn't, the filmmakers didn't have middle chapter of a trilogy in mind when they made it, it does still kind of manage to feel like it. But, the score is great. I mean, honestly, I think in terms of tracks from Star Trek soundtracks, Stealing the Enterprise is one of the best. It's better than some of the ones on the movies that are going to be going into the A and S tier here. Christopher Lloyd was great as a villain. I think he actually got a little underserved. He could have been fleshed out a little better, I think. The destruction of the Enterprise is still like one of those real gut punch moments. But yeah, stepping back to Christopher Lloyd for a second, it's like, you don't often get villains in these movies that show that level of concern for the people serving under him. I think, honestly, Khan is the only one who fits that bill. And even then, he gets so driven by revenge, he kind of forgets about that, and I don't think it occurs to him that he made a horrible mistake until, like, all of them are dead. But, you think about that scene when Krug realizes the Enterprise is about to blow up with his crew on board, and he just screams, just, get out of there, and it's, too late, but, And then you see him, with, his head in his hands the next time you see him on screen, and so, yeah. But, so some of the visual effects aren't quite as clean as they were in the previous movie. You could kind of tell that Nimoy was the first-time director on it. David's death didn't quite have as much weight as it should have, although props to Shatner. That was actually a flub. He was supposed to go into the chair. Him missing it and hitting the floor, that was a mistake, and Nimoy was actually going to call cut, but Shatner didn't break character, so there is that. But yeah, it's an okay movie. I do think some people are harder on it than it deserves, but I mean, also Uhura kind of gets really short shrift in this one, which is actually kind of normal for this franchise until the reboot, unfortunately. But yeah, I still have a pretty high opinion of it. Beyond. A tier, definitely. Best of the Kelvinverse movies. Just really great looking. Idris Elba was great as a villain. Chris Pine finally comes into his own as Kirk, which Into Darkness was sorely lacking. If anything, Into Darkness was almost a step backwards from the previous one. The new character they added, Jayla, she was really cool. Seeing Kirk and Chekhov working together in a way that we generally hadn't in previous entries in the franchise, either in the Kelvin timeline or the Prime timeline. That was nice. That was kind of a nice touch. The song by Rihanna over the closing credits, that's a great song. I like that one. Kind of unfortunate that it was written by Sia, who we all don't like anymore, and with damn good reason. But yeah, it would really be a pity if that ended up truly being the last one. I mean, I know Paramount has announced a new movie coming in 2023, but they've also said nothing about it. And, I mean, fingers crossed that we do get another Kelvin timeline film, because the cast gelled together so well. It would also actually be a nice opportunity for them to bring Alice Eve as Carol Marcus back in, but I'm going to actually get to that when I get to Into Darkness here. First Contact, also going in the A tier. Probably the only next-gen movie that I would call really good. And yeah, it does hit a lot of the same beats as Wrath of Khan, but at the same time, when you got a formula that works, you go with it. The Enterprise E looks gorgeous. Seeing the Defiant on the big screen was a nice touch, even if it was only for like a minute. I totally understand where the dislike of the Borg Queen as a concept comes from, and on the one hand, I agree. On the other hand, I don't know if the movie could have worked without something like that. I'm not sure. I mean, I could easily be proven wrong on that. But James Cromwell was just fantastic as Zephyr Cochrane. And Brent Spiner really shined in this one, too. He was generally good across the entire TNG run, but I think First Contact was an especially top-tier performance from him as Data. And Frakes proved himself as a damn good director, especially since this was like... I think he'd directed some episodes of the show before, but I'm pretty sure this was his first theatrical outing. And all due respect to Nimoy, I think Frakes' first outing was better than Nimoy's first outing. Sticking with the TNG movies here, next up we have Generations, which... Okay, this one is going to be a B, but also with an asterisk. Because it's a mess, but you can't really blame the writers or the director or the cast for it. The blame for everything that's wrong with Generations really comes down to one guy, Rick Berman. Because you may not remember this, but Generations came out in November of the same calendar year that the TNG series had ended. They were really rushing this thing out. And I think that if Brandon Braga and Ronald Moore had even just a few extra months to really polish the script, the movie could have been great, because there is greatness in there. Malcolm McDowell gave a solid performance as the villain. Seeing the Duras sisters get their comeuppance after several seasons of being a thorn in everyone's side, that was nice. I think one thing that was definitely handled badly was the destruction of the Enterprise, and I think what could have helped that is that in the movie, they basically end up having to have the Enterprise crew use underhanded tactics the way the Duras sisters did, and that was a mistake. How it should have gone is that, the crew of the Enterprise wins just simply by virtue of being better trained and having better technology, but they lose the ship anyway because the bad guys used just a really dirty trick and got in a lucky shot. Okay, the way I describe that sounds bad, but I truly believe that in the hands of a competent enough production team, it could have really worked in the film, and it actually would have been a lot sadder to see the Enterprise D get blown up, and you wouldn't have needed that really cheap emotional ploy with the dropped teddy bear. It's like, you see, if they'd done it the way I'm suggesting they'd done it, they would not have needed that shot. Okay, so we get to our first S-tier movie, and is anyone shocked? Wrath of Khan is a movie that could be shown in film schools as an example of masterful filmmaking. It managed to look better than the previous film in a lot of ways, despite having a smaller budget. The actors are on the top of their game. They had a great villain with believable motivations. There are some plot holes that kind of punch a major hole in the film if you think about it for 5 minutes, but because everything is put together so well, it doesn't really matter. The movie still works despite that. And, and despite what, like CinemaSins will tell you, just the mere presence of a plot hole is not enough to ruin a movie. Because if everything around the plot hole works, you don't notice it. You don't notice it, at least when you're watching it the first time. And when you do eventually notice it, it doesn't, retroactively ruin the movie for you. And God, the score. Can we talk about the score? This and Star Trek 2009 probably have the best scores of all of these movies. James Horner was really, really at his peak with this one, I think. It's like, this and the score for Aliens are like his best ones. It's like, I know he won the Oscar for Titanic, but does anyone really remember any of the music from Titanic apart from the Celine Dion song? So, you know. But with Wrath of Khan, like, the music went before the first fight between the Enterprise and the Reliant. The music during the battle in the Nebula, it's just it is perfect. It captures the mood. It sets the tone. It's just so many better people than me have explained why this is a great movie. There are people who have seen this movie who had never seen anything of Star Trek before, and they liked it. That's definitely a good sign. Because I don't know if you could say the same about some of these other ones. It's like, I think you could probably enjoy some of these movies if it's like your first entry. But yeah, Wrath of God is like probably the most solid just film of all of them. And now we take a step down with Insurrection, which is going to go into the D tier. There's a germ of a good idea here, but okay. You know how generally in Hollywood studio interference can kill a film, which is why when you hear those stories about the times that notes from a studio actually help a picture tend to stand out. I believe the original Back to the Future was one of those examples. Someone from the studio was like pointing out that the original script was a little dark and that would probably not help the movie, and so they toned it down and it became like one of the biggest hit comedies of all time. If the people behind Insurrection had listened to the notes, it could have been a better movie, because one of those notes was simply, why should we care about the Baku? And honestly, the only reason the movie gives us why we should care is because Picard says we should. Because Picard says so. Yeah, I got two things mixed up there. You know, take luck. Okay. Wow, that is a deep cut reference. No one is going to get that one. But yeah, if they'd really taken the time to flesh out why we should be concerned about them, and also especially what made this different from the time on the series when Picard was willing to relocate people under Starfleet orders, you know, I think that alone could have been enough to fix the movie. I mean, also cut some of the jokes, because it's not that Star Trek and comedy never work. I mean, Star Trek 4 is a good example of that, and Trouble with Tribbles, Trials and Tribulations on Deep Space Nine. But the track record is spotty. I mean, when it hits, it really hits, but when it misses, oh my god, it is just downright painful. And that's Insurrection, and it's not the worst, but it's not great, and I guess if it had maybe been like a two-parter on the series, it would have been okay, but yeah, it would have just been okay. It would have been an okay two-parter on the series. Not bad, but not great. Okay, here we go. Alright, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and, say it right now. F tier is only going to have one movie on it, and I don't think anyone is going to be surprised what that is. And I think what hurts this one the most is that there's going to be another couple of bad movies coming up here. I think it's... But the fact that it didn't have to be is what really knocks this all the way down. The other two that are bad, they didn't have to be bad. It just had something... Oh, no, wait, no, I'm sorry. I completely screwed that up. What I meant was, the other two were bad, but they were also kind of doomed from the get-go, because there was just stuff that was wrong in the inception that, I mean, they might have been okay if they were lucky, but they were never going to be great. Into Darkness could have been really good. The potential is there. They had the cast chemistry. They had a great villain in Admiral Marcus. Having Khan there at all was just a mistake. Into Darkness would have been a vastly better movie if it was just Captain Kirk takes on Section 31. I don't think I'm the first person to say it, but there it is. And poor Alice Eve. Oh man, I mentioned her earlier. She really gelled well with the cast. I don't know why they felt the need to make Carol British all of a sudden, but whatever. But yeah, she really gelled well with the cast, but unfortunately, because I think the people making the film wanted the audience to be reminded as little as humanly possible of Into Darkness when they made Beyond, they ended up not bringing her back. But, I mean, it's not really her fault. I mean, even Abrams has admitted that the underwear scene was a gigantic mistake. But the fact that this movie did not have to be as bad as it was is what knocks it down to the F tier. It's like, I'm not the first person to use the phrase, ironically, it would have been better if it had been worse, but that applies to Into Darkness here, because the good scenes there are in this film only to show... They don't save the movie. Like, sometimes a good scene can save a mediocre movie. Sometimes a handful of good scenes can save a bad movie. With Into Darkness, though, the good scenes, they don't save the bad movie. They shine a spotlight on the bad parts and make them stand out more, which make the movie worse. If those good scenes had not been there, the movie would have been actually probably more enjoyable. Of course, if the bad scenes had not been there, it would have been a great movie. This would have been like A or S tier, but nope. Instead, it stands alone here at the bottom with an F. And honestly, Benedict Cumberbatch is not that great an actor. I don't get what his appeal is. He's fine as Doctor Strange, I guess. But honestly, the enjoyment I got out of Doctor Strange and the two Avengers films he was in were how he played off of the other characters. So yeah, after that crushing disappointment, let's go to one of the few times that Star Trek got comedy right. And we're putting Voyage Home up in the A tier. It's a fun movie. It's one of the few movies on here that I think you can enjoy even if you know nothing about the franchise. And again, even though it was not intended as a trilogy, it serves as an actually pretty good trilogy conclusion when you put it with 2 and 3. Yeah, I mean, there are the little bits in here and there that don't really make sense, but here's the thing, it doesn't matter, because everything else around it is good enough to carry it. I'm really biting my tongue to keep from going off on another rant about CinemaSins. But yeah, it's a fun movie, and the humor actually lands more often than not, which again is actually kind of a rarity for Star Trek. It looks gorgeous. It's well shot. The probe looks great, especially I got to see it on a drive-in screen. I know I'm dating myself here with that one, but it just is. It looked so amazing up on a giant screen, and it looks pretty good on a high definition screen, even if the monitor is not huge. So, yeah, definitely A tier. Not quite good enough for S tier. I mean, I thought about it, but there are some bits that don't really hold up. There are a couple of jokes that don't hold up that well, but, I mean, I've got nothing bad to say about it. I just don't think it's quite as good as Wrath of Khan, that's all. I mean, I guess part of that is, I mentioned just how brilliant the score for Wrath of Khan was, and it's like, I'm trying to remember I think I remember only a few bits of the music from Voyage Home, whereas if I really like stop and think about it, I could probably like go through most, if not all, of the score for Wrath of Khan just in my head. Okay, so the C tier is empty. Let's put something there. Nemesis. Yeah. Okay. Honestly, the one thing it has over Insurrection, and granted, this is purely subjective, but I think the jokes that they have in Nemesis, they weren't going for comedy, but it's okay to have a joke or two in a serious movie, provided that the scene benefits from it, provided that it makes sense. And the few jokes that there are in Nemesis, particularly at the beginning, before the plot really kicks in and things start to get serious, they work for me. I think most of them, at least, are pretty funny. Some people might disagree. In fact, I think me saying that the handful of jokes in like the opening of Nemesis are kind of funny might be more controversial than me putting motion picture in the B tier. I don't know. But I mean, here's the thing. They did not think this movie through all the way. They just didn't. Unlike Into Darkness, where it could have been great, I don't think Nemesis ever really had much of a chance. Because you had a number of actors who were just getting tired of playing these characters and they wanted out, and I think that comes through. They hired a director who didn't know what he was doing. And it's not that Stuart Baird didn't really know Star Trek when they brought him on. I mean, Nicholas Meyer didn't know Star Trek when he was brought on, and his movie is up in the S tier. Well, one of his movies is in the S tier, at least. I don't want to give away where I'm putting 6 just yet. Add to that, the plot, it borrows just way too heavily from previous films. It's like... I mean, it's like, and obviously the fandom is definitely... It is definitely interested in stories about the Romulans. I mean, just look at how many fans were upset when Picard's Romulan friends in season 1 of Picard, like, just weren't showing up again after episode 3, and people were just like, "Where are Loris and Saban? We want Loris and Saban." But this movie just did not really serve them well at all. Honestly, made them look kind of incompetent when you think about it. And poor Tom Hardy, he really tried, but they just gave him nothing to work with because his motivations were just completely conflicting. It's like, here's the thing. They should have had him either be dying and desperately need Picard's DNA to live, or his motivation was getting revenge against the Romulans for the enslavement of the Remans. Putting both of them together, I mean, I guess it could have worked. I know there's the Jim Butcher thing about no bad ideas, only bad writers. But speaking personally, I think it would have been better if it had just been one of those two things. And honestly, I don't even remember the score of this movie. I mean, I know that it's not the most important thing, but yeesh. It's like even the score for Into Darkness was better than the score for Nemesis, but I mean it's Michael Giacchino, so it's like, who even remembers the name? Who did the score for Nemesis? Does anyone even remember? I don't know. And it's like, I'm not even... It's like... Killing off Data at the end, it's like, okay, that could have worked. I know that Brent Spiner was getting tired of the character at this point. It was getting harder and harder to hide the fact that, the actor was aging, but the character doesn't, But it just sort of felt so slapped on. It's like, I'm not against killing off a main character, but it needs to carry a lot more weight. It can't feel just like, it's like, you can't walk out of a movie saying it's like, oh, the actor must just have not wanted to come back for another one. You don't want that. Because, I mean, you certainly didn't get that feeling out of Wrath of Khan, and at the time, that was true. I mean, Nimoy eventually changed his mind, but he did want out, but that does not come through. If you don't know that going into Wrath of Khan, you're not going to get that feeling watching the scene. Okay, but, let's move on to happier things here. A proper end of an era film. One of only 2 movies that I'm aware of that got the autograph ending. This one and Avengers Endgame. And I'd say it deserves it, so I'm going to bump it all the way up to S tier here. With a bit of an asterisk, because I think, I'm fine with it up in S tier. I mean, Christopher Plummer was a great villain. The score was good. David Warner basically redeemed himself for having had to be in Star Trek V. Every bridge character got a moment to shine. The cinematography was pretty good. The story holds up really well. I mean, even there are some characters who have like one scene who still do a really good job. And there are even some great movies where you can't really say that, but, you kind of forgive it because it's just like, it's in like a relatively unknown, doing only one scene. They didn't need to be great. They just need to move the plot along, But you don't really get that much of an impression from 6. I mean, maybe I'm just remembering it wrong. Maybe I'm looking at it through rose-colored glasses here, because it's been a few years since I've seen it. But I did recently see a video about why General Chang, Christopher Plummer's character, was such a great villain. But yeah, 6 was a great movie. I'm glad it's one of the ones I got to see in theaters. I got to see most of these in theaters, actually, except for... No, actually, the only ones I missed were the first 3, and that's just because I was too young, because I wasn't born yet for 1, I was like months old for 2, and I was still a toddler for 3, so yeah, I've seen every one of these from 4 onward in theaters. A couple of them I've seen twice. First Contact was one, and 2009 was the other one, but we're not up to that one yet. This one. Okay. Funny story about 5, which I'm putting in the D tier. That came out around the same time as Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And my mom was taking me to the movie theater, but we could really only afford one that summer. So, my choice was Last Crusade or Star Trek V.
He chose poorly.
Okay, I enjoyed it at the time, but in my defense, I was like 7. But yeah, with the benefit of hindsight, this movie was pretty much doomed from the get-go. Between Shatner's ego, there was a writer's strike, there were budgetary concerns. They were... Even if they'd had twice the budget they were never going to be able to pull off what was in the script. And the script, it's like, yeah, Gene Roddenberry kind of had a point. It's just like, I mean, I'm forgetting exactly what exactly his words were, but he had issues with the script, and I think it boiled down to, it's just like, imagine reading this description for this movie when it shows up on TV, and the TV guide, it says the Enterprise goes and searches for God. It's just silly. Now, one proper thing I will say about this movie, the guy they got to play Spock's brother, the guy they got to play Sybok, I think he did a great job. And also, I think it's actually kind of unfortunate that this is probably some of the best acting from DeForest Kelley in any of the films. It's like, how sad is it that the best Bones scene of any of the movies is in the worst, probably the worst of the TOS movies. No, actually, no, considering where it is here, yeah, it's the worst of the TOS movies, because 1 and 3 are up in the B tier, 4 is in the A tier, and 2 and 6 are in the S tier, so, But yeah, those 2 things, good as they are, and they are good, which is why I'm not putting it in F tier. Not enough to save it, and Although now that I'm saying it out loud, okay, you know what? I'm actually gonna, you know what? Okay, yeah. Oh god, what was the guy's name? The guy who played Cybok. Oh god, I can't remember. Like Lawrence Bachanal or something. Okay, you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna. Okay, yeah, you know what? I'm doing it. I'm actually gonna swap them out. I'm gonna put 5 up into C, and then I'm gonna bring Nemesis down to D. Or no, actually, no. Nemesis doesn't really have anything I could praise as much as I could praise Lawrence Bachanal and DeForest Kelly. Again, probably the only 2 good things about 5. So, Nemesis is like, again, the nicest thing I can say about it is that, like the wedding scene at the opening before the main plot kicks off is funny. That's as kind as I can get. Okay, now we get to Star Trek open bracket 2009 close bracket. Oh god, there are a lot of positive things I have to say about this movie. There are things that obviously just do not make a ton of sense. But I mean, the cast works well together. The visual effects are gorgeous, if a bit over the top. I think the villain kind of got underserved. I think the performance that Eric Bana gave didn't quite match with how the character was described in the prequel comic, which I believe is supposed to be considered canon with this. Well, though not anymore, thanks to season 1 of Picard. But the score is great. It has probably one of the best openings. I mean, god damn, it's like, yeah, there's the issue. It's like the USS Kelvin was larger than like anything we believed that than anything we were led to believe that Starfleet was using in that time period in the Prime timeline. And this is the point where the timelines diverge, so it should, well, that's nitpicky stuff. Chris Hemsworth was good in the short scene. I didn't have a problem with the sabotage sequence, although, okay, going back to Beyond for a second, I do appreciate how they reused that song in Beyond as sort of just like, yeah, I know you didn't like it in that movie, but I bet you're going to like it in this one. Oh, God. I'm torn between A and B for this one. Because it's like, a lot of the complaints about it are valid. Like, it feeling more like a Star Wars movie than a Star Trek movie, but I don't necessarily think that was a bad thing. I liked The Force Awakens, as I said in my Letterboxd Top 40 video, which is one of the ones I did before this. I mentioned how much Michael Giacchino's score is really good. It's like, it's easily the best part of Into Darkness. Yeah, you know what? A tier. Why not? Okay, bit of an anticlimactic ending there. The last movie I put up there, and like the last thing I say about it is, why not? But yeah, here's my tier ranking. Yeah, I think, of a 13 movie franchise, the fact that, let's see, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, that 9 of them are like, sort of top half here, or like, better than average movies. Yeah, okay, so there you have it. My tier ranking of the Star Trek films.